I want to thank you all for coming. We have Professor Cherif Bassiouni here, and he was a lifelong professor at the DePaul School of International Law, or DePaul Law School of International Law, and was the co-chair of the committee that drafted the Torture Convention. And then Professor Frank Summers, who is training and supervising analyst at the Chicago Institute for Psychoanalysts and a past president of the APA Psychoanalytic Division. And we also have Candace Gorman, who's a civil rights attorney and has represented detainees at Guantanamo. We are Vincentians Against Torture. We'll be meeting again this Monday, and we're comprised of several student groups, including all restorative education and mentorship, which is DREAM, the Feminist Front, the Men of Vision and Empowerment, or MOVE, the Becker organization, Transformation, and the Students for Justice in Palestine. We're also joined by the Uptown People's Law Center, the Voices for Creative Nonviolence, and the World Can't Wait organization, and the representative is Gerald. And Dr. Summers is going to speak first. Thank you. I apologize if I rushed too much.
Good morning. Thank you very much for being here. I want to emphasize the reason why I think it is important that Dr. Koocher be removed. It has nothing to do with issues of a simple disagreement. If he can have any point of view he wants, that is not an issue. It's academic freedom. That has nothing to do with the desire to get rid of him. The reason I think he does not belong as deanship of any university, including a good university like DePaul, is because the man is guilty of egregious ethical violations. Okay? He is mentioned in the Hoffman Report. I can't remember the exact number of times. It's over 70 times. Okay? He was complicit in the collusion between the American Psychological Association and the military, the Department of Defense, to make sure that the ethics code of the American Psychological Association fit what the military wanted. And the purpose of all of that was to make sure that psychologists could participate in torture in Guantanamo and other detention centers. Make no mistake about it, that was the purpose. They had one goal in mind, and that was to make sure psychologists could continue in Guantanamo, where they were participating and consulting on the torture, okay, of people who were brought there without any charges, without any protection of the rights that we have here in America. There was no, in fact, most of the people weren't even charged, and they were just incarcerated, and torture was used, and psychologists were involved in consulting on the torture, and Dr. Koocher was involved in the collusion with the APA to make sure that they could do that. That was the purpose, okay? Now, Dr. Koocher will say, he said, oh, if only we knew then what we know now. And I want to show you what total misperception, misconception, what a total distortion, what mendacity that is. And I'll show it to you by quoting to you from conversations I had, email exchanges I had with him, and his own public pronouncements when he was president of APA during this period, okay? So, Dr. Koocher wrote an editorial in February, you can all look it up, February 2006 in the APA Monitor, okay, when he was president of APA. And he addressed the issue of people like me saying that psychologists were involved in torture in Guantanamo. Dr. Koocher said, and I quote, this is a quote, a number of opportunistic commentators masquerading of scholars have continued to report on alleged abuse by mental health professionals. However, when solicited in person to provide APA with names and circumstances in support of such claims, no data have been forthcoming from these same critics, and no APA members have been linked to unprofessional behaviors, unquote. Now, Dr. Koocher knew that you cannot know the names of the people involved at Guantanamo. If you go down there and visit, which you can't do, but even those people who were able to visit, and they were very carefully selected, people like him who agreed with the policy of APA, the individuals down there, the psychologists, turn their name tags around, okay? So you don't know the names of the people, okay? So that was absolute nonsense. Despite all of that, We did know the name of one person, Dr. John Lessa, okay? And he dismissed out of hand. Lessa was involved in consulting on the torture, in some cases actually being in the room when Muhammad al-Qahtani was tortured. Okay, now that's just one thing. Now let me also point out that I had an email exchange with Koocher after that, okay? And I said I was very concerned about the fact that there were these reports that psychologists were involved in Guantanamo. He said, you're listening to the media is all nonsense, it's all media hype, it has nothing to do with any reality, you're getting the facts from the media, you can't listen to the media, okay? I said, Dr. Koocher, in fact, this is an email exchange, I said, Dr. Koocher, it's not the media I'm getting this from. I'm getting this from two sources. Number one, the report of the International Committee of the Red Cross, okay, which said mental health professionals, including psychologists, were in Guantanamo and were complicit, were consulting on the torture, okay? Dr. Koocher didn't reply. So I said, Dr. Koocher, I got a second source, okay, which is the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. And they also had a report that said the same thing. Mental health professionals were involved, that included psychologists, okay? I get no response from Koocher, okay? I said, Dr. Koocher, if you have any contravening facts other than these, please let me know. This is where I get my information, not from the media. I get no response from Koocher. Eventually, weeks later, I said, Dr. Koocher, you haven't responded. Dr. Koocher says to me, don't hold your breath. Okay? That was his response. Okay? So this man who now says that if only we had known then what we know now, I gave him the facts. There was the Red Cross report, there was the UN Commission report, and he absolutely refused to accept any of it. He dismissed it out of hand. And in addition to that, he vilified, absolutely vilified people like me who were telling him the truth. Not just me, but there were others, John Marks, other bioethicists who were saying this was going on. And what is Koocher's response? To vilify those people who were telling the truth about what was going on with psychologists. And it's those ethical, these egregious violations of the ethics of the profession that is the reason why Dr. Koocher does not belong as the dean of anything. Not DePaul, not any university. Thank you very much.
Next, Mr. Bassiouni is going to speak.
I think it's important for everybody to realize that torture is an international crime, and that anybody who participates in torture aids and abets in the commission of an international crime. We all know that these crimes have been committed at Guantanamo, and that the administration and the military and the CIA have covered up for these crimes. An academic institution like DePaul, based on its Vincentian values, cannot allow a member of its faculty to be involved in such a situation. It is therefore the responsibility of the university to hold a fact-finding commission, an inquiry into whether or not one of its faculty members has been involved in either the commission of a crime or the commission of an egregiously immoral act which violates the ethical values of this university. Obviously, anybody who is brought up on charges like this is entitled to due process. He is entitled to the presumption of innocence. But the university has an obligation to inquire. It cannot put this matter aside, and it cannot be based only on his denials. So this is an obligation that the Board of Trustees, the President of the University, and the University Council have an obligation to look into, set up an appropriate board of inquiry, and find out whether these facts are true, and if they are, appropriate disciplinary measure has to be done. The university like DePaul, which is based on certain values, cannot ignore these values when it comes to anyone on its faculty or in its administration.
Thank you. Candace Gorman is now going to speak. She's a civil rights attorney and has represented detainees in Guantanamo Bay.
Thank you. And Dr. Koocher, maybe we could start with an apology. An apology to my clients in the men at Guantanamo who've by the war criminals, the psychologists and the others that work with the military, I think that would be a good starting point. The men at Guantanamo are still being tortured in a different way, not with the help of psychologists, but they're still being tortured by being held for now 13 years without any charges. Without any charges. These are men who have not been charged with terrorism. They've not been charged with committing any crime. They're just in a holding pattern. Dr. Koocher, apologize for your role in my client's plight. Thank you.
Next is Jay Becker, who's going to speak from the organization World Can't Wait.
The question before is us all is, what are we willing to tolerate? The new student coalition that called this press conference, Vincentians Against Torture, and the hundreds of supporters they have already gathered, is unwilling to tolerate a man complicit in unspeakable crimes, as Professor Bassiouni described. They are crimes at Guantanamo, holding a high position of authority at their university. World Can't Wait, a national movement to stop the crimes of this government, wholeheartedly supports that goal. From Guantanamo to the prisons of Afghanistan and Iraq to CIA black sites, this country has become identified as a world power that commits, condones, and directs torture. And what we allow our government to do overseas, we allow it to get away with here at home. John Burge's torture ring in Southside Chicago police stations, Holman Square, tens of thousands of people held in indefinite solitary confinement in the prisons of this country. Torture is ubiquitous here at home as well. It's the same system that wages unlimited terror of drone warfare in dozens of countries around the world, and a reign of terror in poor communities of color here at home, where we tolerate police shootings of unarmed civilians without any accountability, just as those responsible for torture have not been held accountable. This too must stop. Everyone who knows about these crimes is challenged to stand up and oppose them. Your silence is complicity. The national mobilization, Rise Up October, is a vehicle to do just that. Tens of thousands of people will take to the streets of New York on October 24th and say, this police terror must end as well. Which side are you on? That is the question we put to the administration of DePaul University here today. Which side are you on? Are you the side of the torturers and those who facilitate their destruction of human life and spirit, or the side of humanity and justice? We thank these students at DePaul University for making their answer clear, and we call on everyone hearing this to follow their example. Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Dorothy Pagosa from the 8th Day Center.
Hi, my name is Sister Dorothy Pagosa from the 8th Day Center for Justice. The 8th Day Center is sponsored by 40 congregations of religious sisters, brothers, and priests, and we're there to uphold the social teachings of the Catholic Church. Of course, the major one is justice. You see behind us the statue of Monsignor John Egan, who was a prophet in his time and really spoke to justice in the church and in the world. And at the bottom of the statue, it has a question: what have you done for justice? Well, DePaul University, I would ask you the same. What have you done for justice? Psychiatry and psychology is a noble profession. We need these professionals to help with people who have been traumatized by torture. What a horror that one of these professionals used his power to promote torture and to set aside international law in dealing with the prisoners of Guantanamo. Based on this, we at 8th Day Center would ask DePaul University to remove Professor Koocher from the deanship of his department and to really look into this. No one should be rewarded for allowing torture. Thank you.
I'm going to read a statement from Dr. Jean Marie Arrigo, who's a prominent social psychologist and served on the Penn's task force with Dr. Koocher, often as a voice of both opposition and reason. I have good hopes for Dr. Koocher at DePaul University and wish to continue as his colleague in the American Psychological Association. But his gaps in moral discernment in governance roles at the APA, both before and after the Hoffman Report, render him unsuitable as a role model for scholars at this time. In short, unsuitable for the position of dean. At a Catholic university, there's certainly opportunity for people who have erred, whether wittingly or unwittingly, whether voluntarily or through manipulation, to step aside with dignity. Dr. Koocher must step down as dean at DePaul University. In this gesture of moral awareness, he can return to community. I sincerely hope Dr. Koocher considers Dr. Arrigo's statement. When I first read this, it reminded me that even though Dr. Koocher facilitated violations of human rights, he still has contributed much of value over the course of his career. I hope Dr. Koocher chooses to act morally now and step down as dean. If he does not step down, our student coalition, some of the members are over there, will continue to call for his immediate removal. He has proven unfit for the position of power he is in and should not oversee the education of DePaul's health professionals. St. Vincent de Paul tells us, do the good that presents itself. This is our opportunity as a community, as students, as faculty, as staff, and as supporters to come together and hold the dean responsible for his past actions, lest we ourselves become complicit through honoring him as dean. Please sign a petition if you support, even if you are not affiliated with DePaul University, and recommit DePaul University to its Vincentian values. Thank you all for attending, and we will now be answering questions.
What would you say that, the official university spokesman said that, it's worth reading the entirety of the report? Have you read the report in full? What would you say that a lot of these people haven't taken the time to read?
Front of the mic.
Yeah. He was asking about a DePaul representative who recently spoke at the Student Government Association meeting, and in my opinion, made a completely inappropriate comparison to hindsight in a sporting event. I think that telling the students that they should read the report before making any sort of action or judgment was meant to intimidate them. Personally, I think that you can read areas of the report, that you should do your due diligence. I've read most of it other than the Cliff Notes. I don't think that should dissuade people from standing as students, and I think that the comparison that she made was completely inappropriate. Hindsight in a football game or a basketball game is not the same as this situation, because he intentionally withheld information from the Penn's task force and was generally aware of what was happening at these facilities. I think that it was utterly acceptable, and I think that the statement made by the university is also unacceptable and violates our Vincentian values, and that is why we're standing together now.
Hey Jack, what are the coalition's next steps?
We're meeting again this Monday, and we are planning demonstrations on key days, and we're going to keep fighting. This is worth fighting for. I transferred here, and I really bought into the value system, and I think it's important that we stand by it now and that everyone joins us.
Have you heard at all from Dr. Koocher or from the administration?
I've received one email from him, and I sent a response, and other than that, I have not received anything from him. I notified him of this press conference, and I have a meeting with the provost coming up.
What did he say in his email to you?
Dr. Koocher?
Yeah.
He told me, essentially, I need to study ethics more and build upon my foundation. So I'm going to make sure to continue to do my homework. It's also been advised that we write a letter to the Board of Trustees, so I'm going to bring that up at our next Vincentians Against Torture meeting. We're ready to carry this as long as we need to, and we're hoping that the DePaul community, faculty, staff members, people in Chicago, you should see the people that signed this petition. We got someone from Sweden the other day. We really think that this is something that should matter to everyone. And I think based on the turnout here, I'm very hopeful that we're making a difference.
Yeah.
Please.
I would just like to briefly respond to this analogy with hindsight at a football game, okay? when all this was going on in 2006, as I indicated in my brief talk, I told Koocher these facts. I told him about the Red Cross report, which you should have known anyway. I told him about the UN Commission on Human Rights and their report, which you should have known anyway. And he totally dismissed them and dismissed anybody who suggested psychologists were involved, all of which was the truth. So to say this is hindsight is completely absurd, okay? At the time when he could have done something about it, he dismissed all the evidence and insisted psychologists were doing nothing wrong.
Are there any more questions this time?
How did this Dr. Koocher character manage to slide through cracks and get into DePaul based on this information that you told me? I mean, who's helping him? Who is cohorts? You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do feel what you're saying. The question was, how did Dr. Koocher come to be appointed as dean? I can't speak too much to it personally as an undergraduate, but I know, he has a very long history and has done much for the field of psychology as someone who studies ethics and scientific misconduct, and he has worked with children, and he's very well connected and respected within the community, or was respected, or is, depending on who you ask, within the psychological community.
Okay.
That being said,
so he used psychology to get in it, basically, right? Reverse psychology?
I have no comment. As a prospective psychologist.
Just like that.
What time frame?
I don't believe, we don't believe that the committee did due diligence, though,
okay,
in appointing him as dean. On the petition website, there is, one of the updates has a link to the emails that the committee had, and also has a list of what the committee knew at the time of hiring Dr. Koocher, and it's pretty clear what type of leader he was as liaison on the Penn's task force. He often belittled those who had oppositional views to his own. He crafted language that condoned, really, there were no limits put in place on the enhanced interrogation techniques used on detainees, and he helped craft, or not craft, he sort of condoned the language and helped come up with the language responsible that allowed these people to do whatever they wanted to the detainees that she represents. And I think it's atrocity that he got hired.
Jack, how did this coalition come together, just with the various student groups? Did you reach out to them individually? How did this all come together?
Individuals who signed I started the petition on September 16th, and one of the people who signed it contacted me and helped me set up. And then I got in touch with a ton of amazing student organizations, and we're hoping to add more as we go along, and more students. And now there's 11, 15 of us on this committee, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that justice is indeed done. Thank you all so much for coming.